Hey YouTube, right here. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the medical field. I'm going to start going into more specific aspects of it and really concentrate more on those. The last video I made was a more of a generalized view. But the thing I really want to concentrate on right now is the medical field and it making money and all of that, and how their priorities are in fact skewed. Now, I already mentioned in my previous video how medical supplies just magically increase in cost. That isn't a joke. That isn't an exaggeration either. Unfortunately, the cost of something, once you tack the term medical onto it, exponentially increases. Now, I can see with certain things, that are specific to the medical field, or, have a very specified use in the medical field, such as needles. Needles are kind of used for other things as well, very rarely, but they are out there. And the thing is, those needles are different from the needles that you would find in the medical field. The medical field, it's very specific and has to be treated a very specific way. So, all right, I can kind of understand those being a little bit more. Let's just say it's understandable that they're more expensive. However, there is a lot of waste in the medical field, and this comes down to bullshit policies. It comes down to sometimes, it being necessary for the safety of a patient or multiple patients. And to a degree, I will agree that some of the waste is a necessary evil. However, let's say with needles. Now, obviously, using needles multiple times is a bad idea. The problem comes down to what's done with those needles. And I'm just talking about the actual needle part. I'm not talking about the syringe. The syringe is its own thing. Those are typically plastic. So let's not mince words. Recycling plastic is just as bad for the environment as creating new plastic. But when it comes to recycling the needles, the best way that you're going to do it is obviously melt down the material, because there's nothing biological that's going to survive in molten metal. At least nothing that I've seen. If there is something that's going to survive there, either we haven't discovered it yet, or I've just missed the memo. So if there is a confirmed biological entity that can exist in molten metal, leave a link. I'll go ahead and I'll read into it. But the thing is it's going to take a lot to sell me on that one. But that would be the best way, is, take those needles, melt them down. Obviously you're going to get some slag and so on and so forth, because you're not getting all the plastic or rubber off. You're going to get some slag, you're going to get some pollution from it. But overall, you're going to be able to cut down on cost. And since metals are crystalline, as far as their structure is concerned, basically when you melt them down and then you reforge that metal, it's good to go again. Especially with surgical steel. But there are some things that are more expensive, and I understand why they're more expensive, because they're more complex. Like the needles that have it where the actual needle itself gets withdrawn into the syringe. I understand that. And remember, I'm going into nursing. One of the biggest hazards in nursing is actually needle sticks. So I understand that, those are more complex, so they're going to cost more. I personally consider that a necessary evil because you want your nurses healthy. I mean, let's just be completely honest here. You don't want a nurse that's wondering whether or not they got some horrible disease because something happened where a patient started jerking around and they don't know if that patient had some horrendous disease or not. And I'm going to talk about HIPAA at some point. Not in this video, probably. I mean, I'll mention it. But I'm going to go after HIPAA. And I'm going to go after HIPAA hard. So if you're one of those pro-HIPAA people and you see that video, you might want to pass over it. Or maybe you'll actually want to listen to it and get someone's opinion who's on the other side of that table. But, like I said, that's for another video. Right now we're on medical costs. Now, a lot of research and development has to go in, and I understand that, I mean, you have to make sure that what you're releasing is safe. But one of the big reasons why a lot of medical stuff is so expensive is because, and I know that if you're an American, you've definitely seen this, if you've watched TV or been online, or hell, just you being on YouTube, you've probably seen shit. You've got these people that are so willing to sue the medical field for the people not being perfect. Now, I can understand, if they're, if a surgeon leaves a scalpel in a patient, or whatever. But that's its own thing. But, like, if a piece of equipment ends up turning out, like, during production something went wrong and there's some faulty equipment, they'll sit there and try to blame every last one of your ailments on it. And all of a sudden now this company stands to lose a lot of money very, very quickly. So that the only way to counter that out is them to make enough money to where if something like that happens, they're not going to instantly go out of business. So part of the problem is definitely with our legal system. These frivolous lawsuits are driving up the prices for everyone. So anytime you hear of someone sitting there and going, "Oh yeah, I went ahead and I sued this nurse because I went in," or I sued a hospital, or I sued a doctor because I went into the hospital with a broken leg and I ended up getting a cold while I was in there. Now, I don't advocate violence towards people. So I'm saying this metaphorically. Alright? I want to be completely clear on that. Slap them. Because they just drove your medical costs up. Pure and simple. That's what just happened. Them going through and doing that just justified the medical field charging you that much more money. This sue-happy nature has got to stop. Because that's what justifies this. Because anytime someone goes, "Why are you charging so much for X, Y, and Z?" They sit there and they point to the lawyers and go, "Because of them." Because we need to make sure that we can stay afloat. Awesome. Another reason why is because they can. Like I said, the market's basically cornered. You can't legally get medical help that isn't officially licensed, and anyone who's officially licensed is going to end up charging out the nose for it because, one, the education costs so fucking much money. Hell, just to get your LVN on a low-end cost, you're looking at anywhere from $25,000 to $30,000 to go through and just get the education that you need to qualify to take the test to get your license. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be schooling involved for nursing. There's a lot that goes into nursing, a lot that people have absolutely no clue. Hell, I didn't even know everything that was needed for nursing, and I went through and did my research before I even started up my schooling for it. There's a lot that goes into nursing that's hardly ever mentioned, other than in nursing circles, that you don't find out until you're in the thick of it. So, I'm sure it's the same thing with doctors. A lot of people, you see these memes going around where it's all like, this is what my friends think I do, this is what my mom thinks I do, this is what society thinks I does, this is what I think I do, this is what I actually do. Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those situations. The medical field is a living meme at that point. Unfortunately, it's everyone else underestimating. And a lot of people will sit there and laugh at the what I think I do portion of it. But the thing is, it honestly feels like that because it's such an uphill battle. The moment you clock in to the moment you clock out. It's a grind. And I don't say that lightly. So yeah, I mean, you got the cost of the education, which these people have to end up paying back, and they don't want to sit there and make so little money that they end up, being 20 years later and they still haven't paid off even that student loan. And with the increasing costs for living, let's be honest. Another reason is insurance companies. Insurance companies at this point are getting to play pretty fast and loose with their premiums, their share of costs, and everything like that. But the insurance companies are sitting there and saying, oh, well, you need to give bare minimum treatment. Basically, there's this thing where if they have something that's acquired in the hospital, the insurance companies don't cover it, the hospital eats that cost. Well, shit rolls downhill, and guess what? It ends up coming down to the end user. They're the ones who always foot the bill. Unfortunately, that is one way that Reaganomics does work, is as far as cost rolling downhill. Now, we're also going to go ahead and we're going to talk about medications. A lot of people joke around about, an aspirin costing, $500 at a hospital. Unfortunately, that isn't so much of a joke. Just like with anything in the medical field, it's all like you can buy something over the counter and it's going to be infinitely cheaper than if you get it at a hospital. And I'm going to go ahead and segue into another thing. People going in when they don't need to go in. People that are either going in for attention. People that during the holidays they take in grandma or grandpa and drop them. The ditchers, as we call them. So they can go on a vacation or whatever and they don't have to, figure out, who's going to look after grandma or grandpa during the vacation. So they go in and go, oh yeah, no, they were having chest pains or whatever. Basically using the hospital and the insurance companies as a really shitty babysitting service. Yeah. Although that is starting to get cracked down on. So if you're one of those people that does that, you might want to stop. Because that's actually very quickly going to be considered abuse. Let's go back into legalities. Here's the issue. Medical personnel are not really allowed to defend themselves. Like if someone comes in and they have dementia, and they start attacking you, you have to use bare minimal force. So if they take a pen and stab it into your arm, you would think, all right, well, natural response is you punch them, or you kick them, or you do whatever you can to get them away from you. You're not allowed to do that. You have to basically grab their arm, hold them static, and have someone else come over and start to restrain them. Because obviously at that point, you're not going to have the strength to restrain them because now you're down an arm. And any injury that happens is on you. Patient decides to sink their teeth into you. You have to try to pull their jaw open so you can get out. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And, I understand, people are going, well, they have dementia or they have some mental issue. They don't know what they're doing. Well, here's the thing. Most of the time they know it. I've seen a lot of people with dementia that were in their most lucid moments and then actually actively say, well, I have dementia, so sorry. No. At that point, you know what you're doing. Now, if they're apologizing for something when they weren't lucid, like if they're apologizing for something that happened like half an hour ago or something like that, when they were just very obviously off and gone, that's one thing. But if they're sitting there and apologizing, saying, I have dementia, sorry for this, they're using it as an excuse. And unfortunately, they're allowed to. So when you bitch about, nurses or doctors making more money than most, just remember we need hazard pay because we have to pay for those medical bills. We don't get free medical service just because we work at a hospital or a facility. We incur medical bills just like every other schmuck out there. And in fact, we also have to have malpractice insurance because of one-sided bleeding hearts. Sitting there and saying, oh, well, you have to be held to a completely different standard than every other human in the world. Now, if someone's actively abusing someone, whether it be sexual abuse or physical abuse, emotional abuse, all right, yeah, they deserve to get nailed. But the thing is if they're defending themselves, we need to bring back actual self-defense, especially to the medical field and in particular medical personnel. People need to stop being afraid to be able to defend themselves physically from a physical deadly threat, or even a threat that's going to maim them beyond repair. It's not uncommon to see a nurse come home with bumps and bruises that weren't from, accidentally bumping into something, but from a patient actively attacking them. That is not an uncommon occurrence. And under any other circumstance, people would be all like, well, why didn't you defend yourself? But with the medical field, the question then becomes, well, why did you defend yourself? That wasn't right. So we've got that. Then we've also got the hypochondriacs, which I brought up in my last video. The ones that come in, waste the time, waste the resources. I've had a couple in my family. My grandmother, when she was alive, she was a major hypochondriac. She'd sit there and sneeze once, and all of a sudden, she said it was pneumonia, when her lungs were completely clear. She'd actively try to make herself sick. she'd purposely try to take too many drugs, not enough to kill her, but to go ahead and make her sick so she could go ahead and get attention in a hospital. It's not even like we didn't give her attention at home. Just so that way she could call her friends and go, yeah, I'm sick, I accidentally did this. And no, there was no accident about it. Those people end up making me sick to my stomach, because at that point they're taking up the time and effort of the medical facility that could actually be going towards someone who really did need that help. They might have taken up a bed that could have had a person in it that we could have saved, but ended up dying because they were waiting for a fucking bed. Because there was something that we couldn't really assess in our initial assessment. Hypochondriacs do cost lives. Drug addicts cost lives in that way. Non-compliant patients cost lives in that way. And yet everyone tries to wrest all of that responsibility onto the medical staff. So guess what? Prices go up. Trying to make it more prohibitive for those people going in for those reasons. So that way if someone sits there and they're really against the medical field, you know, they'll sit there, they won't come in unless they are damn sure they're fucking dying. The hypochondriac won't go in because they're all like, oh my god, every time I go in, it's a $30,000 charge that my insurance will no longer cover. Fuck. The drug addict is all like, it's cheaper to go ahead and take the risk on Craigslist to find someone who's dealing. I mean, let's be honest. But also to cover the medical people. Because they have to be paid enough to counter out those extra costs. The lack of mental health facilities. Another big one right there. Because there are a lot of places that could use some mental health facilities. And I'm not saying that facetiously. I'm talking about literally. There are a lot of mentally ill people that have nowhere to go. That really shouldn't be out in the public, because they are a danger to either themselves or to people in public, or both. But there's nowhere to go. Some of them even know it. And there's nowhere to go. And they try to find every excuse they can to get into the hospital, because at least then they're kept in check. At least for a while. Until they have to be discharged because they've been there too long already. And no long-term facilities will take them. That also means lack of trained staff to deal with those specific issues. You get general training. You don't get that specific training unless you decide to specialize in it. But specializing in it doesn't get you anything. All it does is get you more debt. Because there's really nowhere that cares about that specialization. They care about your general. Like, you've got surgical aid specializations, you've got all these other things. Yeah, they'll care about that because it draws in money. Treating someone with a mental illness? Nope. Costs more than it makes them. It's a big issue. I mean, I can go on and on and on about all the reasons why medical things cost so much. I mean, hell, the FDA, the big contributor there. The lobbying system, again, another big one. I mean, it's just one thing after another after another. And the further privatization of hospitals, that's another massive issue. But I would say that the biggest issue is a lot of the frivolous lawsuits. Because when you started seeing those frivolous lawsuits increase in frequency, all of a sudden you saw massive spikes happen in medical costs. And as the lawsuits get bigger and bigger and bigger, so do the medical costs. There's a correlation there. Because, I mean, hospitals are having to pay more and more and more for smaller and smaller and smaller mistakes. And people are actively going out and looking to try to sue medical people. They're trying to find any way to make them screw up, to have something to sue them for. And you got lawyers that are more than happy to oblige. A lot of people call them ambulance chasers. And that is a thing. There are lawyers that will sit there and just wait. They'll go in and ask people, well, did this happen? Did this happen? Did this happen? And they'll sit there and start poking, making random shots in the dark. Just hoping that something will stick. Just so they can go ahead and get that money. But the thing is when they do that, they're not screwing the hospital. They're not screwing the staff in the hospital. Ultimately, they're screwing you. They're taking that money out of your hide, out of your health. Just keep that in mind. And if that pisses you off, go ahead. Call your local lawmakers. Let them know that you have a problem with this. That you're for the medical professionals being protected, so that way the costs that are being passed down to you can be reduced. Have it where there's more funding going towards these public service, the non-privatized hospitals. Have it where, make it heard that you want your tax dollars to go there. Instead of, like here, where I live, a fucking bridge to nowhere, where the plans alone for it cost over $4 million. Or some city beautification project. Something superficial that benefits no one except for the people in office. Because then they can go ahead and give themselves a big fat raise and a pat on the back for them doing jack shit, fuck all, nothing for the people other than spending their money in all the wrong places.